Welcome to another episode, and I'm going to break protocol a little bit on this one. I just out of respect. Our next guest is actually someone who has been very influential in my life, my career, and who I am today. I'd like to introduce Coach Brauman. He has a first name, just not today for me. So if you all know it, that's good for you. What's happening, Coach? Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, Coach, obviously you're no stranger to success on either the World Championship stage or the Olympic stage. You just finished up a great year at Worlds and some great years with the World Championship in Eugene and then back in Tokyo for the Games, now back in Budapest, where you were able to execute from a coaching standpoint with your athlete, Noah, the double of the 100 meters and 200 meters. Just give us a little insight to, your relationship with Noah, which most people don't know can be categorized as unconventional because he didn't go to college, right? So he has literally developed under you from a high school athlete, a junior athlete, all the way up into who he is now. So just give us a little insight to what that's been like for you. Is it like having a son?
I mean, to a degree, but, he's got parents, good parents, so it's not as much a father-son type relationship, but it's a true coach-athlete relationship. I think we have a good one. I mean, I ask him to try different things. He tries them. I mean, he's open-minded, loves to train, loves to be at the track, never have to wonder where he's at or anything of that nature. But he did come right out of high school, but some of the best ones I've had since they were 18, 19 years old, either Tyson, Veronica when they came to Barton, Wallace when he came to Arkansas. Shawnee had 1 year of college before she came, but I don't know how to answer it any better than that. Some of the best ones I've had, you have since they're young.
You've always developed young men, though. I think you definitely have a knack for that. And I'm about to say, kind of being able to empathize first and foremost, but secondly, connect with them in their level. Like you've lived that life. No disrespect to Barton whatsoever, but what I'll say is that's probably not a lifestyle that you were accustomed to going there. You probably had to make some adjustments, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, but people don't know much about it, but I grew up in a small town in North Florida that, everybody there had nothing. So, it was just, you had some upper class people, but most of us, my parents divorced when I was 11, had a single mom at the house, two brothers that I was oldest, took care of, sports for me is what got me out of there. So, it's not too dissimilar than, a lot of athletes that I coach.
Right.
Obviously it's a little different. I am white, if you haven't noticed that. But poor people are poor people at that stage. And, it's I've, and Wallace, you can attest to it, but I've never really looked at color or anything like that. Either you're a good person or you're not. Yes. It doesn't matter where you come from, where you're born, how you were raised. Either, you're a good person or you're not. It's pretty simple.
I still like to think that I'm either, you or your wife's one of your favorites athletes that you come across. So yeah, I can definitely attest to that. That's correct.
I'll let you think that one.
Exactly. Let him think that.
What we're not going to do is sit here and start telling stories because Coach Brauman can definitely air some dirty laundry, and I'm not with it today.
No, we'll see.
It would be the best podcast ever.
I believe it. I know you've seen this guy.
Oh my gosh.
Talk about
Go ahead, Coach B. Let the man know.
No, I won't do that.
You want to talk about the motorcycle?
No,
You had a motorcycle?
Go ahead, Coach B.
He couldn't ride it, but he had one.
You bought a motorcycle?
No. I'm talking about when I was I don't know if I was on pro or was I in college.
No, you were still in college then.
And
he comes to training one day. His palms, his hands are all tore up. I'm like, Wallace, what'd you do? Well, I was walking down the street and tripped on a curb, and I was like, Wallace, you get scrapes like that. So whose motorcycle were you riding?
Terrible. Whose motorcycle were you riding?
That's not important. He's no longer with us, so it's not important.
Oh, okay. And so
there was some cost involved. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
There were some reparations needing to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely totaled a grown man's motorcycle, but
total.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I couldn't really practice for a while. That was not one of my favorite moments. Coach B, he instilled the fear of God.
We had a nice, friendly conversation.
Oh, I'm sure. So, that right there in itself speaks to obviously the challenges faced from a coaching standpoint with young track and field phenoms. But right now in this age of coaching, you face a lot of different challenges from a mental standpoint. I was one who was able to tune in to Noah's documentary. So I was able to get insight to the challenges he faced, from the mental health side. And that part of training and that part of adversity in sport is something that's not very much often advertised, right?
Right.
And especially from an athlete of his caliber. So from a coaching perspective, because I didn't see you much or hear you speak much on it on the documentary.
Well,
how'd you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, just like anything else. I mean, mental health's been around since the beginning of time. Right. It's a little bit more publicized now, which is good. I mean, it's something that needs to be addressed. And, I'd say in Noah's case, his mom's, she was a social worker in D.C., so, she's a big proponent of mental health and all that. And he was, and I'll say, he's man enough to admit that things weren't right and he needed some help. And, they took care of it, and it was something that, it did affect 2021 a lot more than we wanted it to, but, it was something that needed to be addressed, and he needed to, do the things you need to do to get a grip on it, and he did a great job of that, and has been able to, rebound and continue to progress from there. So, it's, it's still kind of that touchy word of people are scared to talk about it, but at the end of the day, I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking for help.
Right.
Absolutely.
And he did a good job of doing that, and, has moved on.
Yeah, y'all managed it really well. I mean, and is managing it clearly really, really well. So that's sensational. So next year, obviously, the Olympics. I'm assuming that the approach will still be for the 1-2 double.
Yeah, as of right now, sprinter sprint in my in my world, it's if you're able and you're capable, this is what you do for a living, and you should run. So as long as everything lines up well, and by the time we get to that time of year, you get to trials and hopefully make the team, either in both or one or whatever. That's the hard part in this country. But then we'll look at it, and as it gets closer, make more decisions based off of what kind of shape he's in, because year to year that changes. But as we're sitting here, we're in the off season before all this really gets started. The goal is to be the very best that he can be, and make a run at both again.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
So one thing that's not necessarily talked about, I guess, a lot, you have Noah and his brother as well. How was that dynamic when you first got them? I would imagine there's some brotherly competition that happens, and I know you've managed those type of situations before, but how was that easy? Was it hard in comparison to some of the things?
They get along great, and nothing of any substance. I mean, it was two different people, and you just train them the way you need to be trained. I think it's harder for them more so than it is for me. In particular, I mean, specifically, because Josephus came in hurt, and it took a little while to get things going, and.
But he's clocked us up 20 as well, though.
Yeah, 1993, which is, obviously stands alone by itself. I mean, that's a great run.
And he started off
I think they're the only two
runner?
siblings to ever break 20 seconds. So,
Dang.
So it's
that's really
pretty
good.
good. I mean, they can run a little bit. So.
Like one of those ESPN infomercials, like when they're sitting there talking about all these records that we didn't even know that had been broken before. That's crazy. I had no idea.
I mean, that's what I was told. I mean, I haven't
I
studied
believe
into it, but that's what I was told. So, I mean, but their own separate people and need to be handled separately, just like anybody else would be. So,
well, let's dig into your career a little bit. And I think this is something that people, if you're in the sport, you might have followed it, but if you're not, and you're a new listener, then this might be new information for you. So, to my knowledge, once again, you actually participated in the sport.
Yeah.
You were a long jumper. And then, to my knowledge, the first job you had, I guess, was at Barton, then went to Arkansas, and now you have your own group in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And what I will say, the one thing I remember about my career is you told us, let me see if you remember this. You told us that humans can only run so fast. Do you remember those times that you named?
Yeah, well, I don't remember exactly the times, no, but obviously that's changed a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But, you also, I think there's a lot of things that go into it too. I think that, there's more money in, not a lot of money, but more money in the sport so people can do it longer. Obviously, I think coaching and training and shoes and tracks and everything have progressed over time. So that all plays into it. But you know, at the end of the day, you still look at it, and you know, there's a range that, you know, people run in, and you know, the really, really good ones are just better than other ones. I mean, it's just that simple.
Can you give me maybe? I mean, you've had, like you said, Tyson Gay, Veronica Campbell, Noah Lyles, myself. I can say Alonzo Edwards, Shawnee Miller-Weibo, Wade Erik, I believe I can't say his name, but he trains with you as well.
Mm-hmm.
You've had all these great athletes, so I feel like you've had to kind of grow with them. But my question, this is me being selfish. What's one of your most memorable races, and then maybe like practice efforts that you've seen over the course of your career?
Oof. Yeah, it's kind of hard. I mean, there's, you know, anytime somebody wins a race, it's a good one.
Absolutely.
You know, I'd say Veronica's first 200-meter gold medal she won in Athens was big. Mm-hmm. You know, I look back on that one, and that was a changing point in, you know, a lot of people I knew at the time's life. But and then turning around and being able to do the double, I mean, to win it again in 2008, and you know, she had things didn't go well in the 100 at her trials. She ended up running, I forget what it was. It was like 1080 something, and ended up fourth. Didn't make the team, but ended up coming back and running 21.7 at the game. So those were all special. Yeah, I mean, I look at it more athlete to athlete than I do anything specifically for me. I mean, I look at, and you know, this is just the way I have my opinion, and everybody's entitled to their own. But at the end of the day, the sport's about the athlete. It's not about the coach.
That's fair.
The athlete wins the medal. The athlete's the champion. I just help coach the athlete. I try to do my best to put them in the best situation they can be in when it comes time for major championships and big meets. But at the end of the day, I mean, my job's over as soon as they walk into the call room.
You get nervous?
Not as bad as I used to. I mean, you know, I tell, and this involved you, but you know, we had a story that, and in golly, what year was that? 2004 maybe. Indoor NCAAs, and Veronica runs and breaks the collegiate record, and we're in the team title, and you know, my two guys are ranked first and third going into the final, and you know, you're like, okay, if they do what they're supposed to, we're going to win the team title. And she just ran and broke the collegiate record. Place was going crazy, and I'm watching, and you know, I'm getting a little nervous because it's coming down that, you know, this race was big, and I'm standing there, and I stand in the same spot I always stand in. The guys know where I'm at, and there was a false start, and you know, no big deal, it happens. But you know, I started getting a little nervous, and they look over, and I happened to had my head down like this, and then they both, lack of a better term, shit the bed. So,
I remember that.
yeah, so they went from being ranked first and third to getting like fourth and eighth.
Yep, yes, sir.
Yeah, it was a big turning point in the meet, and you know, when they got done, I was like, man, guys, what happened? You know, well, Coach, man, we looked over at you, and you looked nervous, and that just made us scared. I'm like, well, obviously, I can never look nervous again.
Right.
Well, it was a big, tough baby.
So, but to answer your question, do I get nervous? I get, what do I get? It's a good question. I mean, there's a lot on the line for the individual on the track. I mean, I get,
In Budapest this year, I've never seen you so confident.
Depended on what was going on, but yeah, you know, I get nervous, but not the same type of nervous that you would assume. You know, I get maybe stoic, get a little quiet, but that's about it. Finals at major championships, I go in the stands to watch, but I sit in the regular crowd. You wouldn't even be able to see me if you didn't know who I was, which most people don't, which is great. Except for this year, and you had Netflix cameras all in your face for everything. It's like, man, I kind of like being over here alone. But you know,
how was that experience? You know, you got to get your share. Obviously, you operate under the guise and scope of anonymity most times.
Yeah.
Because you prioritize your athletes, but this year, you know, from a media standpoint, like you stated, you know, you got cameras following you too.
Yeah,
interested in what pure athletics is and who Coach Brauman is. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was different, but you know, to be honest with you, after a couple, you know, it happened in Paris, and then they were in London, and after that, I just, you know, they were just dudes, and
yeah,
it was no big deal.
Whatever you get, you get.
It was whatever, yeah. You know, hopefully it turns out well and it's good for the sport and everybody benefits from it. But for me personally, it's it's just part of it. It's whatever,
Yeah. Now, do you have obviously you've had great success as a coach. Do you still have goals for the club? Do you still have goals for pure athletics as it relates to the future of the club, the future of the training enclave? And not because I know, for you it's about developing athletes, right?
Yeah, not to cut you off, but for me, as far as the club goes, the club's only as good as as the best guy in it, and it's only as bad as the worst guy in it. Yeah. So it's just, it's just that simple. The club's nothing without the athletes. So as long as, this might sound bad, but it's the truth. As long as I get some talent, they'll run fast.
Yeah.
It's proven. You can look at the results and see it, but, is that me being big-headed or anything else? No, I just think that we have a good process, and when you follow the process works. But it all starts with the fact you have to have talent. Yeah. You can have the fastest donkey, but it's still a donkey. You need to have talent.
Yeah. And I'm about saying as long as they're willing to put in the work, you'll get them where you need to be.
And you got to have the talent, and they got to want to work. And, if I'm going to, just be truthful about the whole situation, the best ones I've ever had, the best ones, wanted to work, wanted to race, wanted to compete.
Yeah.
The money was just part of it. It wasn't, they didn't do it to get paid. Mm-hmm. They did it because they wanted to see how good they could possibly be.
Thanks.
They trusted the process, and they went through it.
Yeah.
Thing we're running into a little bit more these days is, the instant gratification.
Yeah.
If you're an instant gratification person, it's not a great spot. If you're going there and think you're going to PR in the first 5 months, that's not how this works. Right. It's not how the sport is. You gotta come in, and there's things you're going to have to fix, and there's mechanics you have to work on, and strength issues, and maybe you're not. Maybe you come from a program that doesn't run as much as we run in my group, or you run longer and don't sprint as much as we. There's a lot of different variables that you got to take into account. And that's why athletes jumping from coach to coach to coach, whether it's me or anybody else, it's, if you're going to go to a coach, you got to commit 18 months because it's going to take that long for them to break you down and put you back together. Right. And for some, it happens sooner. For others, it might take 2 or 3 years. But if you believe in the process and work the process, stay healthy, do the right things, you're going to be fine because the talent's going to show. And at the end of the day, the talent's what matters.
Yeah. Will we ever see you coach the jumps again?
No, I had a jumper. For a couple of years, Jasmine Sawyer, she did pretty good. She made some finals, made the finals at the Olympics, made the finals. Got third at Europeans and
UK, Great Britain.
Yeah, UK. I used to have a bunch of jumpers back when I was at Barton, but the group itself is a sprint group, so it would have to be a special case because if you're only taking 1 or 2 athletes, that's a whole nother training time you're setting up for.
You've had some big dogs, though, Coach.
Yeah, back in the day, I had some guys that could jump really far.
I'm about to say, some of the people might not know. Give me some of those names if you don't mind.
Ones that stand out right away, Walter Davis.
Louisiana Gunner.
Louisiana, yeah. John Moffitt was a silver medalist in the games. Lee Van Sands. Mm-hmm. LaJuan Simon, who's passed, but he was a stud. Lee Van and LaJuan both jumped. They jumped 1730 and 1750 in the same meet, so that was it's a pretty good accomplishment back
Absolutely.
then. They had a number of 7.5 high jumpers, 7.6, a couple 7.6 guys.
Oh snap! You didn't got Erik.
Yeah.
Do you know any of them?
But they were back in the day.
No, probably.
A guy named Alfred Neal ended up playing basketball at New Mexico State.
Okay.
Played in the league for a little while. A guy named James Ballard that went to Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. I know the name, James. Yeah.
At the end of the day, coach is coach. I was told when I was at the junior college, a lot goes back to that, but it was kind of I had about 50 athletes and my event groups, and my dad's a high school coach, and what you do is you find the best guys you have that year and learn how to coach them.
Yeah.
And then it might be 2 jumpers. Next year it might be Bernard Williams and Derek Brew. It just depended on who was there, what you had to put your emphasis towards. And a lot of those guys, there was I was there for 7 years, and he probably had 30-some-odd Olympians come out of that group. So, I mean, it was a special place at the time. And, you know, when I went to Arkansas, it was the same. Mm-hmm. And now the pro group's, you know, more or less the same. I mean, it's, you know, that's why when I look back on it, everybody's like, oh, what do you, it's, you know, it's the process. We come to work, you know, try to make smart decisions, try to stay away from injuries, and then just try to get better.
Yeah.
I would say, but even when we trained, I would say there's two things. I never really felt like we worked, like you said, we never worked for money. We never really worked. I guess it was never a goal to win. It was always to be the best you could be, to your point. And that's something I guess I've taken that with me throughout my life and tried to apply it in things that I've done. So I thank you for that. I just want to make sure I go ahead and go on record and say that.
I appreciate it.
And the second thing is I'm going to entertain Erik briefly before we have to cut this short. But I want Coach Brauman to give you the 2005 NCAA championship story, starting from the 200 going into the 4x4, if he doesn't mind.
All right, Coach, run it.
Yeah, this wasn't bad. So, you know, Wallace was a pretty good athlete, at least back then. God dang. But, you know, he'd been running pretty fast all indoor season. And, you know, we'd run some 400s early, and he'd been running well. And we get to nationals, and, you know, DMR gets DQ'd the night before, so, you know, points are going to be tight. And he's running a 200. And, you know, we thought he had a shot at breaking the American record. You know, he'd just been running close to it all year. And then he draws lane 3 in the first round, or the prelims, that runs 20:21.
And I was crying about it, and you told me, shut up and just run.
So he's, you know, he breaks the American record in the first round. He's all excited. I'm like, dude, man, we got to run again in an hour and 20 minutes. Would you just shut up and let's get going, you know? He's over there all, you know, waving to his hometown fans and calling the hogs. I'm like, dude, we still got to run. So he gets over there in lane 5 and, you know, runs 20:10, breaks it again within an hour and a half. And he's, you know, he's a hometown boy, so he's all over the place, and he's bouncing through the crowd. And I'm like, yeah, I run 4x4 tomorrow, dude, and we need this to win the meet. So we have some guys, you know, Coach McDonald was the greatest in the world at getting people hyped up the day before the finals, and he gets, you know, we had a couple guys that were ranked like 16th and 12th going into the national meet, and he pumps them up and tells them they need to be top 5, and, you know, everybody's, you know, breathing fire as they come out of there. And then both those guys, they were ranked 16th and 14th, and they both get second.
Oh, wow.
And so meet's over. Well, I didn't tell him, you know. So we get to the 4x4, and it's like, Wallace, man, you're going to have to run, man. We got to be in the top. You know, we got to get at least third in this.
If you win this, we win the meet.
And if you win, you know, if we win it, we win it all. And he's like, oh, okay, you know, he's all excited. And he's on top of the world. Just ran 20:10, you know. And he's going to contradict me on this, but this is the absolute truth, is that, so I go out there and I'm like, hey, you're probably going to be behind a little bit, but Terry's going to get you back in the race. Whatever you do, take your time and gradually work your way, because Kelly Willie was the Anchor Lake for LSU.
I didn't know who he was at the time, but you're correct.
Yeah, you did. But so I was like, take your time, just gradually work towards him. Just don't go out too hard. You know, you got to have something for the end, because you're going to have to try to run by him the last 50 meters. And so I'm standing in the same spot I always stand in, and we're right there. We're probably 4 or 5 meters behind, but we're in the race. And I'm like, okay, this is going to work out perfect. Wallace gets the stick and just hits the freaking gas. And I'm like, oh, here we go. So, you know, he takes it out, and he's flying around, and I'm just standing there because, you know, I ain't going to say anything because he's already going. I'm like, well, let's see how this goes. He goes out in like 20.5.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, maybe 20.6, but he was flying. And for a guy that just ran 20:10, it probably felt okay at the time, but it was still too fast.
It did.
And and I mean, he goes by Kelly Willie in the first 5 steps, and I'm like, oh, this ain't good. And Kelly just ran 45, 20 something today, earlier that day. I'm like, well, here we go. And I mean, he's going and he's flying through, and he kind of got that grin as he looks up at me, and I just go, oh boy. I put my head down. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be ugly.
He looked at me with such disgust, like you don't know what's coming for you, but it's over with, brother.
I'm just like, oh, he's gonna feel this one. So he gets over there, and it's where the scoreboard's at. It's on that last turn, and he kind of buckles a little bit. And all of a sudden, his head went back. And then his arm swing started going to the sky. And then his knees started wobbling, and 2 people run by him in the last 50 meters. And he gets to the line. He still split fast. I mean, it was 45 something.
Yeah.
You know, it was still good. And we ended up, I think we got third or fourth in the race overall, and we'd already won nationals before the race started, but I didn't tell him that. So now you got to remember, he's been, Mr. Fayetteville the whole night before.
Yeah.
During the day, everywhere he went, people taking pictures, wanting to take pictures with him and all this. Then this was back before you had cell
Social
phone
media.
camera, that's how old we are now. But so he gets done, and I go over and grab him. We go back what we call the green room, which is on the back side of the track where warm-ups were at. He goes in there, and all of a sudden there's like an equipment room that's on the very end, and he goes in there and just drops. I'm like, oof, this ain't good. Well, now they're getting ready to start doing the trophy presentations and all that type of stuff, and he starts throwing up, and I don't even know where it came from. It might be a stomach bile or something. It was green. It was just coming out, and I'm just like, and he's laying in it, and I'm like, and we had those white warm-ups, and it's all over the place, and I'm like, oh, God, man. So we walk out, and I go, Coach McDonald's like, hey, Wallace got to come out and get the trophy. Everybody wants to see him. I'm like, Coach, man, he's not feeling very good. He's like, well, you go get him. I forget. Son, he used to call everybody son. Go get him, son. I'm like, oh, okay, yes, sir. Now I go in there, and he's in La La Land. I said, hey, you got to go out and get this trophy. Oh, you mean we won? Yeah, we won, Wallace. It's all right. So he gets up and he walks out there. But if you ever walk into the indoor track at Arkansas, there's a picture. He's holding the trophy on the front. It's the indoor nationals. And his eyes are like going two different directions. Damn. He doesn't even probably remember being there. It was awesome.
He was out there hurting, man.
Man, that was all right.
Oh, it was bad.
That's terrible. Well, Coach B, man, we appreciate your time. Obviously, you're a great asset to the sport of track and field, and you've had great success up to this point, and we wish you continued success with the athlete group that you have, and also continued success in the future, developing future great sprinters for us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Coach. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir.